Greetings and salutations, humans. My name is Bayani Washington, and the historical figure I will be presenting today is George Washington Carver, also known as the Plant Doctor. So, moving on to his early life, George Washington Carver was an American agricultural scientist and inventor born in 1864, Diamond, Missouri. And he passed away January 5th, 1943. So when Carver was an infant, he, his mother, and his sister were actually kidnapped from the Carver farm by one of the bands of slave raiders that roamed Missouri during the Civil War era. They were resold in Kentucky. Moses Carver, he had hired a neighbor to retrieve them, but the neighbor only succeeded in finding George, whom he purchased by trading one of Moses's fine horses. Now, Carver grew up knowing little about his mother, his father, who had died in an accident before he was born. Just to give a little bit more background, he was orphaned as an infant, and with the war bringing an end to slavery, he grew up a free child, albeit on the farm of his mother's former master, Moses Carver. George was a sickly child, and he could not really work in the fields, which forced him to help with household chores and gardening. And that is what led him to take a keen interest at a young age in plants. And he ended up experimenting with natural pesticides and fungicides and soil conditioners. And this is how he became known as the Plant Doctor. So local farmers called him this due to his ability to discern how much to improve the health of their gardens, fields, and their orchards. And this is pretty much the start of it all. So Dr. Carver took a holistic approach to knowledge, which embraced faith and inquiry and a unified quest for truth. Carver also believed that commitment to a larger reality is necessary if science and technology are to serve human needs rather than the egos of the powerful. So Dr. Carver really took a practical and benevolent approach to science, and it was based on a profound religious faith to which he attributed all of his accomplishments. Moving along, Carver makes Black history. In 1894, Carver became the first African American to earn a bachelor's of science. A few years later, in 1896, Carver earned his master's of agriculture degree and immediately received several offers. And the most attractive one came from Booker T. Washington of Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University in Alabama. So, attitudes, contradictions, or complexities. So, agricultural training was not very popular. An attitude held by some people during that time is that agriculture training was not popular. Southern farmers believed they already knew how to farm, and students saw schooling as a means to escape farming. Additionally, many faculty members resented Carver for his high salary and demand to have 2 dormitory rooms, one for him and one for his plant specimens. His role in history. He was an advocate for crop rotation. Dr. George Washington Carver helped educate farmers in the rural South through his bulletins that contained invaluable advice about improving soils, using fixed nitrogen crops, and growing low input crops. Here in the images, these are some of the covers to his bulletins. Looking at the role Carver played in history, he also developed traveling schools such as the Jessup Wagon, a kind of mobile horse-drawn classroom and laboratory used to demonstrate soil chemistry, and other outreach programs to educate farmers. He published popular bulletins, like I had stated earlier before, distributed to farmers for free that reported on his research at the agricultural experiment stations and its applications. Dr. Carver established an agricultural extension in Alabama and founded an industrial research lab where he worked tirelessly on the development of hundreds of applications for new plants. Carver discovered more than 300 uses for peanuts and hundreds more uses for soybeans, pecans, and sweet potatoes. So Carver's primary interest was in using chemistry and scientific methodology to improve the lives of impoverished farmers in southeastern Alabama. The primary crop in the South was cotton, which severely depleted soil nutrients, but by rotating crops, alternating cotton with soil-enriching crops with legumes and sweet potatoes, farmers could ultimately increase their cotton yield for a plot of land. When he first arrived at Tuskegee in 1896, the peanut was not even recognized as a U.S. crop. By 1940, it had become one of the 6 leading crops in the nation and the second cash crop in the South, after cotton. His lasting legacy. The lasting legacy of Carver in the 20th century is the great strides he took in developing both agricultural and industrial products we still used to this day. Also teaching generations of Black students farming techniques for self-sufficiency. So through separations of the fats, oils, gums, resins, and sugars, he went on to find many uses for the peanut. Insecticides, glue, charcoal, rubber, nitroglycerin, plastics, and axle grease are just a few of the many valuable peanut products discovered by Dr. Carver. His efforts brought about a significant advance in agricultural training in an era when agriculture was the largest single occupation of Americans, and he extended Tuskegee's influence throughout the South by encouraging improved farm methods, crop diversification, and soil conservation. On the importance of leaving a legacy, he famously quipped, "No individual has any right to come into the world and go out of it without leaving behind him distinct and legitimate reasons for having passed through it." And that's going to be the end. Here is a final quote just to end things off. 99% of the failures come from people who have the habit of making excuses. George Washington Carver. Thank you for listening.